Good evening. My name is Sbusiso Xaba. I'm the National Chairperson of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, PAC. We are in the platform of the NNLC Youth League. We are happy to be hosted. We're going to request the veteran of the NNLC Youth League, Comrade Patrick Mamba, to just give us an introduction. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Sbusiso, and thank you very much to the leadership of the national leadership of the NNLC Youth League for this honor to be invited to be part of this great political school where we'll be talking about internal conflicts. We appreciate all comrades who have made time to join in this political school, and we also appreciate the great friendship that has lasted so far between the NNLC and the PAC. It's a very, very old friendship, dating back to the 60s up to now. And myself, I've had an experience with Comrade Sbusiso, with Comrade Tami, when we were establishing or starting the Youth League in the early 90s. We would make visits to South Africa for political schools, where we would meet Comrade Nkala, if I may remember, and Comrade Sbusiso. Comrades, the topic is a very important one. Internal conflicts being natural, meaning that they are unavoidable. And so if something is unavoidable, the best you can do is to learn to live and learn to manage properly that situation which we are facing, if it is then considered to be natural. And so I was so thankful to Comrade, a national chairperson, Comrade Sbusiso, for bringing up such a topic for us, comrades. We are all ready to learn in the fashion of iron, sharpening iron, because we'll be engaging one another and we'll be, of course, putting clarity-seeking questions as the session goes on. May we hand over the debate to Comrade Sbu. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mamba. As indicated today, we want to reflect on internal conflicts and putting a proposition that normally does not go well, that conflict will be there, and has properly mentioned, it's something that is natural. It should not be something that is frowned upon. But definitely mismanagement of conflicts should be frowned upon. That's the biggest sin against the organization, because disagreement that can escalate to conflicts are quite a normal phenomenon. You have conflicts inside yourself as one person. As one person, you are a walking conflict machine. For different reason of yours. Once you become two as a couple, there are conflicts there. How you manage them and how you deal with them then determine if you last long or you last a lifetime in your relationship. So as in an organization, once you bring more people, you bring more complexity, which bring more disagreements. You only find where there are not disagreements, where people are indoctrinated, meaning that only one person is thinking and the others have suspended their minds. But as a revolutionary party, being the NNLC, being the PAC, as revolutionary parties, we stand for thinking members, for members who are able to apply science and able to apply techniques and tools of science to come to a different conclusions. Once you start applying tools of science, the interpretation might be different. That might bring up disagreements. That might bring up conflicts. And as we said, that our chosen tool of analysis being dialectical materialism, you will find that it will be emphasized that there are always two opposing forces in any situation. The two-line struggle is a permanent struggle where there is a force going forward and a force reacting to that force. The force of the revolution must always overcome the force of reaction. However, in that process, you might find yourself representing the force of reaction against the revolution. And because of your interpretation of conditions, interpretation of tactics or strategies that need to be embarked on, hopefully not policy stance. But even policy, when policy is being put together, it becomes critical that we engage in discussing that particular policy, and that can be seen as disagreement. Depending on maturity of different comrades, it might escalate to something bigger. Let us look to come to the argument that you are making, that conflicts are natural in an organization, something that should not be frowned upon. If you look at different literature on group development or organizational development, Tuckerman stages normally comes in handy, where you see that there is a pre-stage. Normally it's depicted as 4 stages of development, but you have a pre-stage and the adjoining stage, which are the 2 beginning and the end point. With the real start being the forming. As an organization, when you are forming, you've got a nice issue that you are formed around, or a person that you are formed around, you are all happy. So the forming stage is a stage where vision becomes very important to wrap around with. We are agreeing on that. Sometimes when we are a reactionary organization, we agree on what we are against, but we have agreed on something. When we're a revolutionary organization, we agree on what we are for. So, but the point is that on the formation stage, we are all in agreement. We are all happy to be here. Unfortunately, we have to move on. As we get to know each other, as we then get to the storming stage, this is a high conflict stage. Some organizations start in the forming stage and get stuck into the storming stage for years. Others get stuck in the forming stage, unfortunately. So you find that there is no work, it's just happy hugging each other. But if we are starting to move forward towards work, we start competing for control of the organization. And when I'm talking about the organization here, we must understand it in the context that it might be a branch, it might be a sub unit like the youth league, a component structure. It might be a subcommittee that looks after a particular campaign that has been tasked. All of them will go through the stages. They will form, they will storm. So we need to make sure that we've designed our organization that this storming stage becomes very limited, but we'll deal with that later. After we fought and we didn't know each other and we get to respect each other now, we get to what is called the norming stage, where members now understand each other's personalities, understand the procedures, because those are, and understand the systems of the organizations, because those are the three factors that normally comes into play. The personality and attitude element, the process element, and the systems element or resources element. So after we norm, then we become a performing organization. So from a result perspective, you will find that when we're forming stage, there is no results. It's talk, 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 and nothing. Storming, we are not working, we're busy fighting each other. Norming, we are starting to get to the work. We are starting to get results, but the results are not high. When we get to the performance stage, that's where we intuitively know each other. If we are talking about football, when the ball comes to my foot, I know exactly where Hlatswayo is so that I can pass. I know that if Hlatswayo, if I lift my eyes and see that Hlatswayo is not there, I'll find Mamba in this element. So that's when the organization has been structured until it reached the level of formlessness. You will see that as we move up the steps, we are moving from a hierarchy kind of thinking, but when we get to be a performing organization, we start operating in an ecosystem thinking, in a network kind of thinking, where what rank in the organization you hold is not really the most important thing, but it's what is your talent on the work that we are doing now, because we are focused on performance and outcome. Then there comes a time where the organization expires. This is either the opportunity to redefine the organization and go back to forming, or it dies. So it's depicted as steps here, but if you see, it's really a cycle that is continuous. Because when you get to a level of stage of development of an organization, you have to start afresh, because you all start not knowing the new you as an organization, the more matured you as an organization. Is there a question on the issue of development before we move forward? No, we are not looking at that. So, as we have said before, conflicts are normal. It's not something to be afraid of. But what we are afraid of is our ability to think and think deeply on what we want to do with the conflict. If you see the slide that we have on our workshop, we've got two elements where we look at the conflict models or the strategies where you decide what do you want as an outcome. For you to have a particular outcome, you must know how to escalate or de-escalate the conflict or the source of disagreement. Going there, you'll see that you basically have 5 possible outcomes. On our right-hand side, where you have to decide if you want to be too assertive or you want to be not so assertive. Do you want to be too cooperative or not want to be cooperative? The ideal is to find a win-win situation. That's why in our organization, we always say no compromise, no surrender, because we don't want lose-lose. We don't want half-lose, half-lose, half-win for us or for the people that we are engaged in. Because we normally talk about, in Pan-Africanism, we talk about the thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis. So synthesis, it's when, like Einstein says, that we cannot solve the problems in the same paradigm on which we created them. So it means that you must find solution outside the paradigm on which they were created. But before you get to that stage, which is depicted as collaboration in this terminology, there are either possibilities. You either avoid, where you just run away from conflict, where you don't want to assert yourself, you don't want to cooperate either. So you avoid the conflict. We're going to deal with the consequences of that. This is good when the issue don't matter, because there are things that really are so exciting emotionally, but in the consequences of things, it doesn't matter. So it should really be avoided. But other things are pregnant, are like pregnancy. The more time goes, the more it grows as well. So when you do avoidance on something that is dangerous to the organization, then, or you avoid conflict with people who are assets to the organization, and you keep on moving it away, you are likely to find disengagement in the organization. And the biggest nightmare is for an organization is disengagement. It's people who are no longer, don't care, but they are just hanging around in the organization. You don't want to have a membership like that. So you don't want to avoid issues that really touches people. There is competing. You want to win at all costs. That normally happens in congresses. I hear that the NLC is going to Congress. The PAC is going to Congress as well this year. We find ourselves creating a competition to position in a manner that we don't care what happens to anyone. We don't even care what happens to the organization, as long as I got the position that I want. So for things that are as serious as that, you don't get into the competitive space. You really have to find a better way to handle. But there are situations where you realize that just to teach this person a lesson, I need to beat them up, hopefully with an argument, without the fist, and win, and have a winner takes all, because we got a situation where the person has to learn something from that perspective. Most people goes for compromise. And as I said, that normally that's not the space that we want as revolutionaries. We want a better solution than a compromise solution in our disagreement or in matters that we are dealing with, or in the situation that we are dealing with. And when people want to at every cost, at all costs, want to be cooperative, and they lessen their assertiveness, you become accommodating. So you are accommodating the other person. It's lose for you and win for the other person. There are situations like that where you just say winning of that person sometimes the win of the organization more than me winning. Not because it's correct, but because maybe temperatures are high. But as I said, that most of the time you would like to be in that stage that is collaborative. In literature of Pan-Africanism, you'll find that anti-collaboration, we were basically talking about these 3 stages of avoiding accommodating the enemy in our camp, is not collaborating in this perspective of this model. In thinking about the strategy that you use in that model of Thomas and Kilman, you will see that the Danish Center has presented quite a nice scenario on how does a conflict expand. They talk about disagreement first, which is just not seeing things the same. Then you pacify it, you personalize it, or where you see the other person at fault. Or you expand the problem. The problem, we're talking about this thing, but you then bring other things that are associated to this thing. The example that is used here is that it's not the first time you do this thing. You remember when you also did that to me. You guys left me on purpose when you were going to that campaign or that rally. You left me again. So you are expanding the problem. Then it's abandoning the dialogue. Stop talking to the person. That also it's an escalation from expanding the problem. It was better, you are still talking about it in the 3 earlier stages, but now it's high. And the one that is liked is liked in politics, it's where you use symbols. You then define the person as an enemy. This is not good for internal. The escalation to these issues of abandoning dialogue, enemy, being hostile openly, and basically creating factions or polarizing the organization, creating 2 organizations in one, where you see that there is this organization and this organization, but they call it themselves the same name. That's highest level of escalation, which is polarization. In external politics, you must know how to tweak this, because sometimes you must intentionally create tension. In dealing with external, sometimes you must raise it to the highest form of those who are with us and those who are against us. But internally, as a scientist, you always have to look at where is this conflict in this escalation levels, and how can I bring it down to the level that is lower until we are able to engage properly. So you have a side of escalation, you got a side of how to handle it. Over to you, Comrade Mafa.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairperson. Chairperson, kunana ligama lana lisolo livela la. Lelithi perspective. Then bese kunana iphathi lapha lecala khona ngala ku conflict escalation. lelo ibekako lethi disagreement amongst members, lokusho ukuthi we do not see we see things differently. Bese kuba naligama lelingale lelithi perspective, lokusho ukuthi we are members of the organization, but asiboni tintfo ngasolinye, which is a challenge that is faced by many organizations, but even in our organization. Kuneligama le chairperson le ngicela ukuthi manje ngathi ulichacha kahle lelithi perspective, because as far as we concerned, because what causes conflict ngiloko ukuthi njengoba ubeka lapho lokho ukuthi malunga organization yinye, we are members of NNSC, but ngiloyo la kule organization une tool of analysis yakhe, lokusho ukuthi nangabe nje sima members, because kune part levedile lapha eqaleni wathi dialectical materialism as a tool of political analysis, lebe sisolo sichaza, but uthola ukuthi kunemalunga lamanye akekho lapho, but iphathi endoze lokho lama amalunga saview athi indvodaba ingabe what strategy you can use from that members kokuthi sizame ukuthi sikhone lokuthi sibuye ndzawonye, because neligama lolichazile lapha athi it's become difficult once wafaka le tool leyo, because some members indlela lokukhanza ukuthi kuyenteka la internally, angathi ukuthi uma sitofika lana sekuthi sesimalunga sesibona ngasolinye, because it really cause conflict lokuthi asibone ngasolinye, because lo munye uthi scientifically this kumele sihambe kanje, athi lo munye ngidabeka njengoba liqiniso athi hayi my comrades iBhayibheli lithi, yabona. Then more especially the use of religion lana analyze le political situation lana kule organization kwanza analyze ngayo, kwanza ukuthi ayikho yinye, bese cause conflict. Ingabe singakhona kanjani ukuthi sifighted to that point kokuthi sigcine sibuye kuyinye tool of political analysis lele endoze le organization. Ngathi noma ngivakala kahle chairperson, thank you.
Uzwakala kahle mAfrika. It becomes partly political education, but political education create awareness and gives a bit of the window of the knowledge, the ability to use the tool. We will not be at the same stage. So the more we practice the use of the tool, the better we become. Let's not be impatient with each other. We'll always be at different stage of maturity. We just hope that the more cadres become at the similar level of maturity and understanding the politics of the organization. Perspective, if you remember, we used the word before when we're saying that, who do you represent? Whose eyes do you see the world through? That's one part, that's perspective. And then there's perception, which says that which beliefs and other similar things can cloud your environment. So if you remember, when we dealt with those two concepts, we indicated that we are in revolution, meaning that we are in continuous search of the truth. All of us. The truth eludes us because of our perspective and our perception. The more we come to the same perspective and we align our own perception, the better we'll see the truth. But that is continuously refined. It's like when you are wearing glasses and a little bit of the mist and you keep on wiping them, or you're driving a car, you have wipers so that you can see better in terms of perceptions. But the perspective, let's continue to reinforce our understanding of the tool, because even us who have adopted the tool might not be applying it correctly due to experience on the use of the tool. Comrade Mamba, I saw your hand. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, comrade. Just got left behind a little bit on the Thomas Kilman conflict model. I was thinking probably one would be in the process of conflict management, be pushing towards the compromise position. And I heard you say probably the best sport would be the collaboration part. Can I have further clarity on that? Which point should we push for in the process of dealing with the conflict situation? Is it competing? Is it avoiding? Is it, okay, I did understand that with avoiding, we have to sort of put the issues at scale. Those that may bring some damage to the organization, we shouldn't avoid, we should handle quickly so that it's resolved. Now, which would you, in your opinion, seriously consider to be the best position? Is it collaboration? Is it accommodating? Is it avoiding or competing or compromising?
It is situational. It is situational, but ideally, you always want to be collaborative because you on compromise, as you're highlighting, you are sitting, you are saying, someone say, this is my position, the other one say, this is my position, then you all move to the middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
But in collaboration, you take a different approach. You then say, this is my position, then you put it on the side. And you say that, can we come with a solution that gives you everything that you wanted in your position? That gives me everything that I wanted in my position. Which is not easy, because that one needs you to really apply your minds and be really ready to think outside the box, if I can use that term, because you have to think beyond the thesis and its antithesis. So that's where the terms of the negation comes through, because you have to question the obvious until you basically escalate the solution, escalate to a totally different thing that no one came with from on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone go home, he says he comes out back with a totally different solution to what he left with at home to the table.
I see. Okay, now I'm assisted, comrade.
But it continuously to serve both. We both must win. And that's what collaboration is about. Compromise is that we must both win a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's normally useful to people who are negotiating on behalf of others to say, bro, just give me something. That's compromise. Give me something so that when I go back, I will say, I won this. But we have to give this. But what if we can think a little bit deeper and find tools that can assist us to take us a level higher, where we can win everything? Everyone go home and say, I got everything that you sent me. My mandate is fully, I'm fully back with the mandate, with the value that you send me to go and take.
Mm. Sure.
And as revolutionaries, even outside the party, in creating society, that's why we normally fight dogma, fight even Pan-Africanism or socialism, ingabi inkolo, ingabi theology, but it must be a science. We must continuously question what we think we know, so that we can break through to a higher form of culture, higher form of society. But even internally, depending on the scale, of course, of the situation we're dealing with, because once you become collaborative, you must relax and take time. But if you look at our culture as African people, the discussions under the tree, as compared to the courts, you will see that desire for collaborativeness rather than for competing, which you go to court for. Because when you go to these courts that we have, the so-called civil courts, you win or you lose. Whereas when you enter the arena of our courts as African people, as we used to have, where people will sit under the tree and deal with a complaint that the person has brought, not only to find the other person guilty and fine them, which happens sometimes, but to find, even if that penalty happens, it might happen within the form that we are still going to live together. And we still have to love each other after this and continue to be, either if it's within the family, the conflict, be the family that we want to be, because no one has lost, but people have been brutally told to change their behavior and forced to change their behavior. Conflicts it can be mentioned in different ways, but I found this nice one. It was not about conflicts, but it was about more transparency, which I find that in my analysis, conflicts come from the same things that create clarity in an organization. Once any of these are not aligned, then you start having conflicts in the organization. So hence we're saying, how do we handle conflicts? What do we want to do? Do we want to escalate, de-escalate? We must analyze, where does the conflict come from? The perceptions will cloud you. How do you move this lenkungu, this mist that has over you? And then zoom if this problem is done by the symbols and the language that I've used in the presence of the comrade. What has offended the comrade? Is the way that I responded in the way that they've done something? Did I become a reactive? Did I respond in a manner that belittles the person? Did I respond in a manner that show them as not intelligent enough? Which comes to that personification that we saw earlier. Is not that has caused the conflict that we are present with. It's not just that we are following different processes, so the processes are tangling on each other, because the person believes that the standard operating procedure that we must follow, or that's a process that we must follow, and I believe that's a different process. So is our conflict process-wise, or is it a symbol issue, or is it a response? Is it the way that we're interacting? Am I seeking collective leadership as I do my work, or I just do it because it's correct in my head? Do I try to interact in a way that makes an interface in a manner that makes everyone comfortable? Am I the problem here in interaction? Is the other comrade interacting properly? Is that the source of our conflict? It's our working style. That productivity and the work pace, is it because I'm slow and my comrade needs to be fast, and I'm slow on purpose because I feel that if we move faster, we'll leave the community behind? those kind of issues, the most important one is just personal manners. This is very interesting because personal manners are different. When you come to the people who are born in townships of Gauteng in South Africa or Azania, you'll find that is totally different to an urban person, Eswatini, or an urban person in deep Zululand, or in or rural people. So what we define manners can create conflicts among ourselves when someone thinks that is well behaved and we find them offensive. That's why it's important as an organization that in each of these elements, we must be clear. We must have a standard operating procedure. We must have rules or bylaws or whatever we call them, which are internal policy that govern us, that we spend time teaching each other what does it mean to be a member of the NNLC. That's why the other session I was trying to highlight on artifacts, that as PAC, we will pick up who's the member of the PAC very quickly in a crowd where there is no one who's wearing symbols, but when we sing the national anthem, there's a way that we will stand and there's a way that other people will stand. So when you stand in the wrong way, then you find that you create a sense of discomfort to the other person because you show different identity to them, and we like identity that mirrors us. Otherwise, we find ourselves being disagreeable. I will not go through this, but there are techniques. I will just highlight that as revolutionaries, really, we must study the science of coaching. Whenever you get something which talks to coaching and how to approach the skill of coaching, where we listen more than we talk. We know that we are not obsessed with winning arguments where it's not necessary. We can manage our own tone. We can avoid gossiping about each other or being too personal, where especially in a conflict arena, know how to de-escalate emotions, because we disagree, and once the disagreement gets too emotional, we end up saying things that are way above our, below what we intend to say, and escalate the conflict. And we need to internally, we need to learn to apologize when we are not correct. And we need to learn to forgive and not to raise things that have been forgiven. And that's part of the process of resolving conflict. So there are these various techniques that needs to be learned. Each one of these is not easy. It's not easy to maintain a body language that reduces emotions, because it happens subconsciously. But it's a skill that can be learned. It's not easy to stay calm when the other person is shouting. But it needs to be learned if we have to if we have to minimize conflict among ourselves. Because as we said, disagreement up to conflict, there must be there in the organization for the organization to grow. When we don't call each other out, when we don't say what we are thinking, and we keep on withholding amandletu because we don't agree, it becomes a problem. You should have just said it, we deal with it. You lose the debate because we are in interest politics, so the position that you come with must be banned by the understanding of what is in the best interest of an organization, what is in the best interest of the campaign. Once it's banned, and we subordinate to the majority that with open eyes of hearing. And we must learn to have a little bit of humor. Don't take everything seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously, because that escalates conflicts. I think going through this alone, through the techniques alone, can be a session of its own. And there are better people who can go through it. My point for this session is that we must make an active effort to go beyond policies and procedures, to go beyond strategies, and go and master the techniques of escalating and de-escalating the conflict as necessary. But at the end of it, as we said, we want the conflict to be resolved. We don't want to lose each other unnecessarily, or make members disengage because you are conflict ridden, you hold a very senior position, so you are too powerful. People see you as an organization. They leave because they had a conflict with you. Or you don't hold a position, but you got a strong personality. That personality must be managed so that there is proper living together without compromising the search of the truth scientifically. Then there's an issue of the process. As we are highlighting that we have a conflict, if we start on the right, we have a conflict, you must bring the parties that are conflicting together for them to identify the source, as we have highlighted, but the root, what does it mean? Why there is that conflict? Because most of the conflicts become perpetual because everyone keeps on dealing with symptoms and never go to the root, and together define the potential solutions. That's where the issue of deciding that we are competing or compromising, I'm in a better position or not, comes into effect. We define the potential solution beyond, from the root rather than from the symptoms. And hopefully mutually agree on the solution and define the implementation plan. Then we go through the implementation plan. So the question becomes, when do you get involved? If you remember, there is also avoiding. Some issues that arises are not worth engaging on. Others you avoid because it's natural that it will de-escalate, and you see there is no need. It's not in the best interest of the organization that it escalate, or it escalate at this time. Because sometimes it's a matter of situation, it's a matter of timing. Very important to manage emotion in this process and build trust and seek solution. The seek for a problem should be a very short transition, because you just want to zoom into the source, go to the root within the source, and out of that, you then spend more time in a solution seeking stage, because you don't want to stay in the problem. I think when you look at this slide, the skills that are critical in deciding if you get involved or not, specifically coaching becomes quite important. Listening with an intention of understanding. So it forces you to practice to delay your response, because sometimes we listen to answer instead of listening to understand. Trust is built by building rapport, by listening as the person is talking, because you are not in a hurry to answer and give your side of the story. Reflect back on what they said to say that, did I understand that you are saying this and this and this and this? For me, when you say this and this and this, it makes me think like this. So you are taking that respect, so the person realizes that you respect them. You disagree, but you respect them, because we must always, in a conflict situation, we must always separate the issue and the person. We don't destroy the person, we don't deal with the person, we deal with the issue at hand. In mentoring the person, which is not in conflict, in mentoring the person, we can work on the person and the personality. But once we're in conflict, let's not conflate, let's not label. Let's focus on the issue, the problem. What is the root problem? Where's the source of this conflict? That's a thing that is an enemy for both of us, not each other. We must seek to better solution. As I said, the solutions start from a solution of competition. It can be a compromise. It can, but ultimately, we want to arrive in a solution where we find common ground. Not only common ground, but higher ground. Conflict must assist us to move as an organization to a higher culture. As two comrades who are conflicting, if it's only the two of us, to the higher being of us. Because as members of the organization, we must also get our being to be better. May I then open for general discussion. Over to you, Comrade Mafa.
Yes, leadership. Leadership. Ngisacela kubeka na practical experience. Let's get say experience. Our comrades. Kuyendeka comrade emacabane abe nawo ukudisagree. Kwanze ukuthi akavumelani lapho avumelana khona, because uthi Marx vele we are living in a society yakhiwa abantu, and once kuwaba nebantu society kutaba nema ideas la different, and vele it is bound ukuthi kutawuba ne conflict kule society, but conflict does not mean war. Isathi nje ukuthi sisho sasiboni ngandlela yi. Then i-practical experience ebeyaba khona ngokuthi emacabana yacabana. Then there is this kind of comrades lokhanza ukuthi nase ukuhlala phansi kuthiwa kuyakhulunyiswana. Kunama comrade ajaha ukuthi I'm sorry. But then at the same time the comrade ansi sizama ukuthola the solution njengoba usho lapha egcineni. Then the comrade he repeated the same mistake. Then ihlayise phasi nayikhulumisa yathi I'm sorry. In that situation, Molly, what advice can you give to us? Because kunalama comrades asangabona ukuthi asonile nasensindlala kuthola solution. Avela athi I'm sorry. Ngiyaxolisa macabane yathi hey kungiphunyukele. For example, I can make an example. Ngiyathatha comrade ngiyasho ukuthi our revolutionary regalia, you can't wear it uhambe etshwaleni yonatha ngayo, ayisiye kunatha vele. Awunje etshwaleni nawe etshwaleni yothi chaza wena gcoka skipper sakho hambe yonakuzana because this is the name. Athi hayi vele uyabona ama-police organization asho njalo. Ukhange ukuthi kusasa sobanjiwe sonayo maybe sekuningi ngale yentekile but utholakala nenazana. Nisinathi nikhuluma naye athi I'm sorry. But the same mistake happens ahead. What kind of advice can you give to us, leadership? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. It basically takes me to the level where I wanted to close with this point, that it's important for an organization to have processes for everything. And conflict resolution has a number of phases as well. One of the phases is that one of conciliation and mediation, basically, where we are trying to find, we are bringing people together. We identify comrades that have an issue. Someone brings them together. Conciliation, I think they bring themselves together. It's much easier. But mediation has an external person to the issue who bring them together. But there is an important one that is vital, which is disciplinary. We have to be clear on the rules as organization, on the rules of behavior. If you are talking about personal manners, on the rules of managing our artifacts, as the example that you are saying. If those rules are clear and they are broken, putting a disciplinary measure must be normalized in an organization. In other organizations, it means that once you go to a DC, you get expelled or suspended. That's a wrong approach, because disciplinary action must always be corrective. The organization is bigger than you. The organization teaches you, assists you to behave by role modeling what right behavior is, and by disciplining you when they've taught you and they've modeled the right model behavior and you do otherwise. Of course, sometimes, as I was saying, escalation, sometimes it ends up to a polarization stage. They are comrades who require to be released from the organization, but I hope not for regalia, for some things that are more serious than that, where because also we have people who come to an organization to create problems because they are deployed to create problems to bring it to a standstill. We must have those channels as well. So conflict, it's as permanent as change, but it's necessary that we manage it. We must manage it properly and use the right tool at the right time, use the right methodology and choose the right goal and decide how much we need to escalate it or de-escalate it down. I don't see any other hand in that perception. On that note, Mafrika Mamba, over Mafrika Jobe first before I go to closure.
Amanda, comrade.
Amanda.
Comrade, Nambuto nami, but I will be direct. Let's say ke lama conflict akhona mholi and uba salungisele chief ubonakala vele ukuthi vele lanenkinga njengoba usho ukuthi wasekhonzangala ukuthi basemebhisi uyakhweshiswa yabona e-organization. But then the thing is sifika njani lapho khona sesibona khona how can we see ukuthi vele lo muntu udeploy because singaze ngathi indlela uzame ukudehlisa uzame ukuculisa uzame ukwenta ukuthi nebenivale but ubona ukuthi le agenda la iphushako say beyond akusasiyo ukuthi it's just the conflict ukuthi my ideas clashana nanje vele udede uphazamisa so ngikuphi afuna sisibona khona ukuthi okay now it's time ukuthi maybe because kuse groupini umkhiphe or vele umresignise ngengane umcoshe so angathi chief ukuthi ngafika kophela period esibona khona ukuthi hayi le conflict lena vele isilidela ukuthi sasemrelease lona because une yakhe agenda kusile sicabanga ukuthi sinayo sonke izwelethu.
That question it's a very difficult one. I think we must bring an expert on it. It's a nice question. I will not be able to exhaust it now, but I think our procedures our rules should assist us in this, in how many times do we allow for this person or and how do we classify? That's why as revolutionaries for a long time our revolution is moving slow, because we have not sufficiently codified things. Because you don't want as an organization to make a rule because Sbu is not fashionable. He's just been removed as a national chairperson. He lost Congress, therefore he started being harassed by the organization now, or people who carry the lever of the organization. You don't want that as well. So the trick is to codify our rules, so that our rules are consistent with everyone. But how do we see the person who's been dropped in the organization to create chaos permanently? Comrade Mafafa, iBhayibheli isihlahla sibona ngeyithelo. Sibona ngeyithelo. So if someone is permanently creating an environment in an organization that is not supportive to the goal of the organization, as an organization, we must start noting the person. It doesn't matter if it's been brought by the system or is their own personality, but we need to see the fruits, to say, Tina, we are oranges. Why this lemon is here? The lemon must go to other lemons. It must come out of a lemon tree, not from us as an orange tree. So you see them with their actions. How much impact they have, it's the learnings that we must put in our disciplinary codes that assist us to see that. But I note as something to be engaged in, to say, how do we see? I have someone in mind who we will bring to take us through. Why should we have the kind of eyes? How can we acquire the right eyes to see without getting into this habit that is in my party, comrades, where if I don't like someone, I start calling him an agent of the state and labeling him everywhere until everyone believes, which is a very bad thing because it's anti-organization. And most of the time, those who normally see agents, in the long term, they are agents themselves. It's part of demobilizing the organization. I hope that I partly answered the question. And as I said, that it's an hour's topic, this one. And we're gonna find someone to walk us through that journey.
Is that?
Comrade Mamba, over to you in closing.
Oh, thank you so much, comrades, and thank you very much to all of us for coming together for this session. Thank you so much to the facilitator. We've learned a lot. We talked about the stages of development, which was about the forming, the storming, the norming, the performance and adjourning stage. And we also talked about the strategies on deciding on a goal, where we emphasized on finding a win-win situation, which led us to talking more about the collaborating stance or position under the Thomas Kilman conflict model. And we talked about how a conflict escalates, where we talked about it starting from disagreement and personalizing issues and expanding the problem by digging graves. And then we talked about abandoning talks and the use of symbols and labeling, which was found to lead to polarization and splinter. We also talked about the sources of conflict and the conflict resolution techniques, which talk about apologizing and forgiving and having willingness to compromise and not taking issues personally and paying attention to non-verbal communication, which I found to be a profound and very difficult stance, that of not paying attention of paying attention to non-verbal communication in the process of conflict management or conflict resolution, and prioritizing resolving the conflict over being right, rather than choosing to find yourself to be the only right person, and focusing on the conflict at hand, not past ones, which is the matter of digging graves. The advice is that we stick to the question or the problem or the conflict in hand. We also talked about remembering the importance of the relationship, which is very key. We also, the speaker even compared this to taking the civil court system, which leads to win-lose situation, and which no longer now looks at the issue of the importance of the relationship. It doesn't look at the conciliation stage, that of bringing peace after the talks. So I also find that point to be very important, remembering the importance of the relationship after the talks. We should still be able to look eye to eye after having talked over the conflict. Then we also talked about taking action, which also talked about knowing when to get involved, managing emotions, building trust, building rapport, and listening to understand, not to listen to answer, because listening to answer doesn't make you a good listener, because you might skip some points in the process whereby the other one is bringing up his or her issues, and then seeking solution and defining the implementation plan, where you will unpack the conflict and find common ground. Thank you so much, Comrade Sbu, for this. It would have not come at the best time more than this one, a time where we find ourselves internally having some conflicts, talking to the issue of a republic compared to a constitutional monarchy, to parliament. And so those discussions, and one has got this wish that as we engage in these talks and we apply scientific means, we don't degenerate to levels of polarization, where then we will have a situation where the party is getting into splinters. Because we once reached such a stage in the life of the party back then, where there were some two groups of the party, but we were able to resolve it. We thank you so much, comrade. We hope the young lions, the young leaders, the Youth League is learning, because they are our future leaders who will have to provide leadership, proper leadership that will be able to resolve conflicts that are always natural and unavoidable in an organization. Thank you so much. Africa.
Africa.